We are live. Another VC Wisdom Pod. I have the pleasure of welcoming Calvin Goforth. Really nice family name as we spoke pre-pod. Calvin is founder, CEO at VIC Technology Venture Development. We spoke last time, and I thought this would be a pretty good podcast right there. Calvin, just for a background, he's a PhD in mechanical engineer at Stanford. So quite the technical guy or systematic thinker, I would say. And nowadays he invests in life science. So we're going to talk about that: biotech, medtech, VIC tech, startups, investing, everything in between. But before we do, this podcast is brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start, scale, or be invited to a podcast like that, have amazing guests like Calvin, pick their brain up, get insights, get subscribers, get listeners, right? Me and Calvin will share audiences, and that's really powerful. And even get leads and clients. I get leads and clients all the time. Podfire.com if you want to start, scale, or be invited to pod. Calvin, really glad to have you on. Can you introduce yourself and tell us about your startup, your VC?
Sure. As Charles mentioned, I'm a mechanical engineer by education, but I've been in the startup world for a very long time. I started my first company in 1994 and made a lot of mistakes, but somehow stumbled my way to success in that. And I've been doing startups ever since in a wide variety of roles, from founder to executive to investor to board member. And most recently, I founded VIC Tech, which is a venture studio, which means that our business is to identify promising technology innovations in the life science space and to form new companies to build and commercialize those technologies. And we've been doing this for a while now. We've got 16 portfolio companies, in the life science space. That includes therapeutics, medical devices, diagnostics, and related areas like analytical instrumentation. And our companies are at all stages of development, from early stage to those that have products on the market and growing revenues. And I think we've over time learned a lot about how to do this. We made a lot of mistakes along the way too, of course, but I think we've gotten pretty good at doing what we do.
Right, and you've been in the game for almost 17 years now. Have you got some exits yet? What is the average exit cycle in your sector, in biotech and medtech, and what can be the size of these exits? Are we talking about 10x? Are we talking about 50, 100x?
Yeah, so I mean, the life, when you start at the stage that we do, which is from a technology, we're not investing in companies. We're forming companies ourselves and building them from scratch. So the life cycle of these companies can be, quite long. In some cases, 10 plus years. In other cases, we've gotten to an exit event in a much shorter time frame. But anyone investing in these type of companies needs to be a patient investor. On the other hand, the upside's very high. These companies can be worth hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars, depending on how far you take them. And there's always this kind of trade-off that we're looking at in terms of risk versus reward, because if we have the opportunity to sell a company pre-revenue, that can provide a fantastic IRR. But on the other hand, we're leaving a lot of money on the table compared to taking the product to market and establishing that there's really customer demand for the product. So it's always a trade-off, risk versus reward. But in general, these are high impact, high reward, and relatively high risk type of endeavors.
I see on the website here, Ascendant, DX, and Blue and Green both have been acquired. If I'm an investor and I pass you some money to actually start these startups, what kind of returns can I expect, and after what time? And on your side, what are the returns that you can expect?
So we have an affiliated investor network that co-invests with us. We call it the VIC Investor Network, and it's high net worth individuals from across the country and even internationally that co-invest alongside VicTech. And it's advantageous for these co-investors because they're trusting that VIC has done the extensive due diligence, which we have, and is there involved in protecting their investors because they're investing on the same terms as VicTech and aggregated voting rights. So they're side by side with us, and we protect their interests throughout the life cycle of their investment, and that's a big advantage. But the average IRR across all investments made by through the VIC Investor Network since its formation in 2013 is 44%. So it's a 44% IRR, which is pretty outstanding. And we certainly think we can continue to do that. And that's a combination of both realized and unrealized exits. Realized exits and unrealized value growth. The unrealized value growth is calculated simply by the last share price from outside investors into the company compared to the investment price that the VIC Investor Network members put their money in at.
And Blue and Green, for example, was a $20 million exit. Let's say that you invested $5-10 million to get that one off the ground. Is that like an accurate estimate?
Well, Blue and Green actually was before we ever formed the VIC Investor Network. So Blue and Green was really when we were kind of in the process of learning, about how to do this. So that was really a different business model. Our business model that we have today really started in 2013 with the formation of the VIC Investor Network, and the exits we've had in there are not the same exactly as what VIC has totally exit because for example, we had an exit in Clixo for VIC Investor Network members. It was a 6x multiple in 5 years, but a lot of investors stayed in, including VIC. And the reason we stayed in is because we think there's going to be a much larger multiple in another couple of years. So anyway, the Blue and Green was a little bit of an earlier iteration, for us, before the current business model.
How do you run these businesses? It's one founder/CEO per business. Tell me about the team building aspect.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do is when we form the company, not only have we done extensive due diligence to really understand the opportunity, the risks, the competing technologies, the market drivers, all those things, but we also look, can we put the right team in place? So we have our own team members that have expertise in all the different areas we work in. Some are, therapeutics people, some are device people, some are diagnostics people. And when we form a new company, we typically have one of our managing directors serve as interim CEO of the company. And then we hire in the first scientist or engineer to work on the product development. And then they're supported by the complete VIC team across, complete back office support and everything else. And then as the company progresses, and goes from being a technology to being a prototype product and getting closer to commercialization, that's the time that we find it's an attractive time to recruit a permanent CEO. And our team members who specialize in getting these companies launched and getting traction and really, ensuring that the technology does what we thought it does, de-risking it to a large degree, then they move on to the next company in our portfolio.
Right. The average check that you write per company is $250K to $500K. How long does that seed capital last usually?
Yeah. So we put in up to $500K as the founding capital in every new company. That's from the VIC Investor Network. That's their day one when we form a company. And 20% of that money is from VIC. The other 80% is from our co-investors. That money doesn't last a long time. The purpose of those funds is to get the company immediately launched, to establish that, that we've got some traction, with the technology and position the company for outside funding. We've never not been successful raising substantial outside funding following that initial capital. That initial capital typically lasts, a year or so, and that's about it.
Right. And you're in a market that's notoriously long to reach product market fit, whether it's because of the FDA, the approval, the clinical studies, and so forth. How do you make sure to tighten that product market fit and get that feedback as quick as possible to maximize your chance of reaching hyperfit?
Yeah, so one of the things we do it in a variety of ways. But one of the key things we do is we really work towards having discussions with potential strategic partners who are also potential future acquirers of the company early in the process. So for example, we created a company in our Dallas branch called Selenic Medical, and it was based on a technology we licensed out of UT Southwestern. And it's a non-invasive device for treating infections on implants. So people have a knee implant. If they get infection and the antibiotics can't cure the infection, it's a very traumatic thing. They've got to take out the implant, put a temporary thing in, treat the infection, and then they have to go back in and re-put it. I mean, it's just terrible.
Right.
So this device wraps around the knee, and I won't go into the technology details, but it works incredibly well.
Wow.
Early on, when we formed this company, originally all the technology had just been tested with using BBs implanted in mice, BBs with bacterial contamination implanted in mice, and that was the original proof of concept. But even back when we first licensed the technology, we were talking to the Puyi Synthes, which is a division of J&J, about this technology and getting, saying we understand this is really early, but is this something you'd be interested in eventually? And ultimately, Johnson & Johnson led our Series A just recently, and they led it, with the intent to acquire the company in the future. And of course, we've got now at this stage where we've got large animal data and it works just fantastically. Now we've got other large strategic partners interested as well. But talking to strategic partners who are also future acquirers, also future potential investors, early in the process is a good thing. And most of these companies we're not worried about them coming in and scooping away the technology because they don't typically like to go that early. They like to be informed, and if it works and you prove it, then they're interested. So getting their feedback early is one of the things that we often do in our companies.
Fascinating insight. I wish I would have done that with my first nootropic startup. Was Health Canada approved. We had studies with the lab that it was neuroprotective and so forth. And yeah, just have the connections, right? That these very large companies, talk to them, chill with them, make good connections, make friends with them. And it's just fascinating listening to you. It must be quite intellectually stimulating to do these things, but it must also be heartwarming to know that you're making that difference in the life of people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the fun of this is knowing that these technologies not only have huge commercial upside, but they have real impact on people's lives. And that's definitely a rewarding part of what we do.
Yeah, just fascinating. Yeah, because I want to launch my own venture studio startup in that niche. It seems that the cycles are incredibly long, but yeah, it must feel quite rewarding. Then I can't help my brain but to think of AI and AlphaFold and technologies like that. Do you think there's a way to drastically accelerate your cycles by modeling what these compounds or the chemical reactions, or in the case of the prosthetic, for example, to have that in vitro and to modulate how it would react in the computer world of things, in the virtual world, and then possibly drastically accelerate and then do human tests? Do you think that would be possible? Is that something you have your sights on?
Well, yeah, let me see if I can answer this. There's a lot of different aspects. So, we have, companies are using AI and machine learning. So we have a company, for example, called CardioWise that uses AI to compare hearts with a normal, healthy heart database. And the level of insight and the quantitative nature of the comparison is just pretty incredible. So for diagnostics, AI machine learning is already getting out there widespread. For drug discovery, AI is a tremendous tool for parsing through the virtually infinite number of possible compounds that could be synthesized and finding ones that are potentially good candidates for drugs for specific conditions. And that's a technology you're seeing further wider and wider. And of course, then we also use in silico methods for other things, like for example the selenic technology that I mentioned earlier. There's detailed computer simulations, finite element analyses of the knee in the body, and the comparison with real world testing is incredibly accurate. I mean, it's just what the computer says it's going to happen is what happens. So answer is yes. One of the reasons we're in the life science space is because there's a whole suite of underlying tools, including AI, but including things like gene editing technologies and big data and all kinds of things that are there today that are creating a pace of innovation in the life science space that's never been seen before. And of course, with that kind of change comes big opportunities, opportunities to improve the world, opportunities for investors. Just big change is big opportunity.
Yeah, I think humanity's on a rocket ship. Like, just being alive in these times is just a massive privilege. What are your objectives for the rest of this year? There's 4 months remaining. What are you spending your time on?
Well, we're always raising money, so that's a never ending thing, because we've got our own pool of money, but we also, these companies typically take many millions of dollars to get them through their life cycle. So we're always raising capital. We're also always evaluating technologies. We've got that could be the basis for our next company we form. So we've got a team we call our opportunity assessment team, meets every week. It's a 15-person team. It includes our managing directors, some of our scientists and engineers. And every week we meet and review technologies that could potentially be the basis for our next company. And we go through hundreds and hundreds of technologies every year to find one that we decide fits our model and is our best opportunity for a new company. So we're always spending a lot of time on that. And then of course, just the process of supporting all these companies that we currently have, where we've got a great team, but these companies don't go drive themselves. It takes a lot of work to move them along.
Right. Incredibly intellectually stimulating, the venture studio that you're building. So very interesting to hear you talk about it, Calvin. Thank you for the insights that you shared today. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, they can go to VIC's website, which is victech.com, VICTECH.com. There's contact form on that site, and there's bios of the different people involved and information about our companies. They can also go to vicnetwork.com, which is the VIC Investor Network site. And if they want, they can sign up for a webinar describing how the VIC Investor Network works and what the advantages are for participants. It is open only to accredited investors, but for people that have the means, it's a potentially good opportunity.
Thank you so much. That was a VC Wisdom podcast with Calvin Goforth. I am your host, Charles Cormier. You can find out more about me and how to start